Good morning, everybody. Welcome. I appreciate you spending a little bit of your time with PRI today. My name is Ed Claughton, and I'm the founder and CEO of PRI. If you're not familiar with us, we are a criminal justice records management and technology consulting and training firm in business since 2008. Simply put, we exist to make your jobs easier while operating at peak performance and in compliance with information management requirements. We specialize in public records, NIBRS reporting, information management operations in general. On the left side of your screen, you will see a chat button. That will be where you will submit your questions. There will be time reserved at the end for you to submit any questions. I would encourage you to please wait until that time to submit your questions so we can get through the presentation as smoothly as possible. But I will leave time for you, and feel free to enter those questions there in that chat box. You'll see a question question button up at the top. I do request that you please use the chat button instead. It's just easier for us to navigate on our end. Below the chat button is the handouts button. If you click on the handouts, we provided you a number of resources, including guides, articles, training information, a toolkit, and more. I think you'll find all of these pretty informative. You can download those at any time, but so as not to interfere with the presentation information, you may want to wait until the end, and you'll have time reserved to go through those materials at your leisure. I do want to call out your attention, though, to a couple of them that I think are particularly important. Besides the handout for today, this presentation is in a PDF form. It's the third file down. The RFP says RFP demo handout. You can print out this presentation as a PDF and take notes. We've included some information about our company, some marketing information, and information about some resources that we have available to you. But also, I would like to make you aware of the fact that there is information that further describes what's available to you as it relates to this presentation today. We're going to talk about RFPs, talk about project management, and then there's a brochure in there if you want some follow-up information or assistance from us. Take a look at the RFP package information. But nonetheless, I think all of the stuff is going to be very valuable for you. There's case studies in there. There's guides on government IT, purchasing and RFP processes, procurement best practices. Making sure your CAD and RMS project goes right is a very interesting article. So again, you'll have time at the end to go through all that stuff and save it, download it as a PDF. All right, so for the agenda today, we are going to very briefly talk about the current climate and its impact on you and your operations and future budgets and things of that nature. We'll talk about a couple of case studies, one in particular that's very important to learn from, lessons learned from a large RFP slash CAD RMS project failure that occurred just recently, from which you can take some good key takeaways to prevent those kinds of things from happening at your agency. I think you'll find that pretty interesting. We'll talk about why projects fail, the different phases of a project, different approaches to writing an RFP, and then we'll tell you about your options and training available to you as it relates to procurement, RFPs, and project management in general. So it's no surprise that with today's civil unrest, coronavirus, and all of the things going on in our world today, that you will likely be experiencing some budget cuts. To give you some perspective from the other side of the table, if you will, as a business that serves law enforcement, we have discussions with agencies across the country and can confirm the word of the day is, in fact, budget cuts. As a result, the business community, which serves government as we do, is going to have to adjust. And this offering of ours that you're going to learn about today is part of that adjustment. It will be important for the law enforcement community to have alternative resources at its disposal to navigate through these times cost effectively. And we as a company have strategically identified an avenue to that end when it comes to procurement of new systems. So there was an article that came out in the paper recently by USA Today that talked about a survey they conducted. Says nearly half of the 258 police agencies surveyed in that survey are reporting that funding has already been cut or is expected to be. So we've responded to that as a company by strategizing, thinking, how can we serve you better? And that's a large driver behind this offering that you're going to learn about. So our research indicates that project failures are quite common. For this presentation, I just went online and did a quick search to grab some headlines and just show you some samples of cases that have made the news. This is one that says OPD back in 2012 lost nearly $2 million on failed technology projects. The Boston Police Department back in 2017 got a new records management system, which was deemed by all involved within the agency a nightmare. And just 3 years later, actually 2 years later, in 2019, they launched yet another system. They went with another vendor in light of that particular failure. In 2015, the Alaska Department of Public Safety spent 11 years and $27.9 million trying to replace the state's aging criminal information management database. And then the last case study, the one case that we're really going to dig into here for the next couple of minutes, something called the Region Project, the Regional Justice Information Network Project, project that came out of the northwestern states, Portland, Oregon, and Washington, a shared agency project that, as you can see by the headline too, was considered a quote unquote disaster. And that's the one we're going to talk about for just a minute. So $12.6 million spent, $6 million over budget, 4 years late. The Region Project involved 43 different law enforcement agencies that were seeking to join in and share the same CAD and RMS system hosted by the Portland Police Department. As a result of the incident that happened with this particular project, the decline in service to the public, and most importantly, officer and citizen safety being called into question, the project was scrapped just several years later. This two-state RMS sharing cooperative between these Washington and Oregon police agencies was dubbed to be one of the largest in recent history, at least. It's a project that has received significant attention thanks to the press coverage detailing its problems. At last count, there were 9 stories that have been published over the last couple of years or televised in the Northwest about the failures of this very, very large project. In just a few short years, agencies which bought into the Region system are now pulling out. How did this happen? Well, we're going to talk about that today throughout the presentation. But I want to call your attention to the RFP that was written for this very large project. The RFP included 4,728 system specifications, detailing very specific requirements for nearly every single function of the system, essentially telling software companies how the system they've built should operate. And it is this kind of approach, creating unrealistic expectations, that will doom a project from the beginning. RFPs must be written to leave room for solutions to needs, not be written with nuanced demands for things like 12-point font and certain colored cursors and similar unnecessary requirements. Agencies must realize that business processes will change when new systems are implemented. Needs assessments and change management is imperative. And I always tell our clients, look, there's definitely a middle of the road here, a middle road wherein you need to understand the system will need to meet your essential needs, but you too, at the same time, will need to meet the system's essential needs. Both sides, both sides will have to adjust to some degree. And a bad RFP, in combination with poor project management and a failure of the agency to adjust its protocols, workflows, and certain procedures, will most likely doom the project from the outset. So we need to define the problem, and we need to ask bidders to describe how they're going to solve it. So after 7 years, 7 short years, the region project was scrapped, beginning in 2018 through part of 2019. And each agency that was going to be sharing that system had to contribute a certain dollar amount as part of the ongoing support costs. As of, I'd say, about the middle to the end of 2019, there were only 7 participating agencies left out of the initial 43. And as each one pulled out, that left Portland Police stuck with the bill, and their contributory requirements to those ongoing costs obviously increased exponentially with each agency that left the consortium. And now Portland Police today are asking the City Council to approve yet an additional $1.4 million for this fiscal year. Actually, they made this request last year, fiscal year 2019 to 2020, and another 1.5 million for fiscal year 2020 to 2021 to cover those gaps, and yet another $5 million to be set aside to create a new, more affordable system for Portland Police. And so that's to give you a little insight into one of the main drivers behind, I should say, project failures is in fact the RFP itself. And so let's get into some further details. There are a myriad of reasons a project can fail, but the most common ones plague government technology projects. And understanding these reasons is going to help you to avoid them in the future. So we'll go through these quickly one by one, beginning with leadership, a lack of leadership. Too often, technology projects are deemed IT projects and are relegated to the IT department, regardless of the fact that the project is a law enforcement project. Relegating it to the tech guys is to invite failure. So, for any project to work, it must have strong partnership between those agencies and strong leadership across departments from the top down. It's funny, just a couple of months ago here at PRI, we got a call from a large agency in California. I actually was given the call to speak to these folks directly. It was a large agency looking to replace a CAD and RMS system. And one of the first things they told me in that conversation, mind you, this was about 2 months ago, they said, we are in need of a consultant to get our CAD and RMS systems replaced, but we need it done within 8 months. And the two, and besides, aside from the fact that that's an impossibility, okay, to go through the entire project and get these systems stood up for this size of agency in 8 months is just an impossibility, especially if you're going to do it right. But the worst part of that phone call was that the two people I were talking to were the two people that were in charge of the project, neither of which worked for the police department. They were both IT folks who were spearheading, managing, and overseeing this project. And this phone call didn't even have somebody from the agency on the phone that was going to be using the system. And so leadership is a two-way street. It's a bipartisan effort between both the IT and the police department. It's an important thing to remember. Lack of accountability applies to both internal project team members and the vendor themselves. If your project team can't adequately explain what's happening on the project or what's needed, that's a big, big red flag. And if executives aren't driving the project and holding the team accountable, it can easily spiral out of control. Accountability must also be woven into the RFP by means of terms and conditions which both hold vendors accountable, yet at the same time aren't so overly restrictive that they provide for unfair, one-sided terms, leaving the bidders in a position thinking that doing business with you and your agency is going to be a nightmare. So remember, these projects are a partnership, and they shouldn't by any means, they should not ever be adversarial. Insufficient communication is important. Not it happens quite frequently. It's important. Communication itself, I should say, is important not only with the project team, but more importantly with the companies that are going to be bidding on your project. Due to outdated and overly restrictive procurement policies, communication is often prohibited with vendors. The typical procurement process is about whether the agency has met procurement laws first, and then and only then, secondly, whether or not they actually achieved the outcomes they were looking for. Procurement's ties to arcane policies not only make the project difficult to navigate, but it also stifles innovation and creativity. Because government fears bad results, they write layers upon layers of regulations and rules around contracting. And so, using a system that was designed to buy a commodity, to buy a complex item like a technology system, simply doesn't work. Departments may not fully understand their business requirements, and they may not have defined current workflows and their performance metrics when the RFP is drafted. But consider the fact that bidders often can't deviate from the scope of the RFP once the contract is awarded. A department will say, for example, they want to improve, I don't know, say the timeliness or accuracy of data, but no one ever bothers to say what that looks like. So, how will you know when you've succeeded? And if you don't know, the project is in fact going to be doomed for failure. A much better approach is to invite proposals that gets a vendor involved early and requires them examining the entire business process to determine the best solution to your agency's needs. Communication with vendors, which is outright prohibited, is quite frankly completely counterintuitive and prevents the ability to clarify expectations, to resolve misunderstanding, and to get everyone on the same page. And these so-called cones of silence, where communication with the vendor community is absolutely prohibited, were born out of the 1960s in an effort to combat and prevent corruption during the government purchasing process. So it's a legitimate concern, and certainly we have to work towards that end and make it an ethical process. But at the same time, we wouldn't hire a contractor to work on our house without asking questions. We wouldn't let them inside our house and build our home from the ground up without allowing them to speak to us, to resolve misunderstandings, to make sure everybody's on the same page, to clarify expectations. And so these approaches of outright prohibition against communication with the people who are going to be providing you with the product, it just doesn't make sense. And so there's a better way. Poorly defined outcomes. This too is very, very common. And poorly defined outcomes does not mean that your agency should draft highly complex requirements to combat that. And so what happens is we have this knee-jerk reaction and think we have to be so specific and so utterly granular and so overly detailed in our RFPs, so we're very clear about the vendors understanding our project. To the contrary, explaining in clear, simplified terms what is needed and expected is important. In fact, I would argue the more complex the project, the less complex the purchasing document should be. Okay. So, no plan or no timeline. Bidders should be expected to provide an element of project management and be held accountable to time bound deliverables. And this too is achieved only by specifying those requirements in the RFP. But again, we don't want to be overly specific when it comes to features and functionality. We'll talk about more about that in just a few minutes. Failure to seek feedback. Okay. While leadership is very important, you want to avoid at all costs failing to include the most crucial element of the project, and that is the end users, the people who will be using the system the most. the people who have their finger on the pulse of what's needed, and not involving them, not involving your end users, not involving your system administrators in defining the solution, and not requesting vendors to describe how their system will meet their needs is to an invitation for failure. And so solving the wrong problem is what happens. It's what occurs when the real problem, as a result of these previous items, isn't correctly defined and is thus incorrectly communicated in the RFP. Listing out a long sheet of very specific features and functions, i.e., the region project with 4,700 technical and functional specifications in it, this tends to result in missing the big picture and not describing what that picture looks like. Is a cloud system needed, or is it an on premise system that's needed? What systems do you need to interface with? And will those systems that you're interfacing with be replaced in the coming years, leaving you with a non functional system? Will other agencies be using your shared system? See, these are the big ticket, big picture items that get lost in the details. In fact, they often get left out and neglected altogether because we get so focused in on the minutia and building out this long, 1,000 line, multiple thousands of lines of spreadsheet information detailing what we think the system should look like. Okay. And we're going to talk today about getting away from that. So lack of accountability, no communication with bidders, poorly defined outcomes, no defined timelines, a failure to seek solutions to users' needs, and describing the wrong problem, or not defining the problem at all for that matter, all leads to a bad RFP. Okay. These are things which manifest themselves right in the purchasing document itself. I want to talk just for a couple of minutes about the phases of a project, the 5 phases of a project, beginning with project planning. Okay, this will help guide you through the project process from planning to completion, implementation, completion, etc., and give you a quick overview of what that looks like. Okay, any project begins with project planning. Okay, and so assuming the project has been funded and green lighted, you begin then with identifying your project team members and roles and building cross functional teams from the various components of the agency. These might, for example, include things like a patrol work group, an investigations work group, a records work group, communications work group, and so on and so forth. These groups will be responsible for defining the current problems and developing and proposing their solutions. How to answer those needs. What are their expectations of the new system in each of those components, each of those areas of the department? During this phase, you'll draft the rules of the project via something called a project charter, which defines the project specific policies and the chain of command and the timeline. This is also the phase where you would be developing a risk mitigation plan to help you prepare for the stumbling blocks. And by the way, every single project has problems. Every project will have its stumbling block. It's what matters is your preparation for and ability to overcome them, preparing for them when they happen, and having a plan in place to resolve them. There's no such thing as a problem-free project. There's too many moving parts to it. So we have to plan for that. We have to build a timeline. We have to build a communications plan as part of this phase, which spells out who will communicate what information to who, when, and what will be the means of the communication. Email, written updates, perhaps an internal website, intranet site. The next phase is the needs assessment phase. Very important work occurs here, and this is the phase during which the work groups evaluate your current protocols in each of their respective areas. This is where we would draft the as is and to be workflows, how conditions are today, the way you're sharing information today. Are you printing out paper unnecessarily? Are you creating files and printing these things out and creating paper files unnecessarily? Are we making too many copies, duplicitous copies that are not needed? And we're going to map those out and rework them in preparation for this new system that's going to be managing all this information. And that's just one example, but to explain what that as is and to be concept involves, it's all about workflows and preparing you and your agency and your team members that change will be coming. And too often agencies forget that they will have to change business process. Okay, you can't force feed the system to work exactly as you are today. There's that halfway, that middle ground that I talked about just a few minutes ago. That's so important to you for you to keep at the tops of your minds as you go into a project like this. So these work groups will also define what the functional capabilities are that are needed in the new system. Okay, think about traffic reporting, investigations, patrol, communications, and so on. Do you need specialized reporting features? Features that would cover the needs of things like the training unit, the canine unit, managing equipment, crime analysis, crime mapping. Okay, what different functional features and components within the system, the sort of specialized capabilities of the system, will you need? The next phase is procurement. And this involves drafting the RFP, evaluating vendor proposals, conducting the system demos. Obviously, you have the opportunity and absolutely should have the the vendors come on site and demo their systems for you. But one thing that agencies also forget, it's a thing that we have done for our clients in the past that's really neat and works quite well, is in addition to the demos, which are scripted scenarios that the companies actually provide to you. You build these scripts, right? And you say, here's a scenario of an officer responding to a call. Here's what happened to that call. Here's what needs to happen with the system in terms of its functionality. We need the officer to write the report. We need it to get assigned to a detective, and so on and so forth. There's another thing that we're seeing, that we encourage. We see a little bit more of today, and that's your lab, lab, your hands-on lab. We did a project a couple of years ago, with a great client up in Washington, and we set up a lab after the demos were conducted. Which again, because it's a scripted process, um, that doesn't necessarily lead to full insight into how the system looks, feels, functions, operates, etc. So when you have a lab, a room set up with say 5 or 10 laptops where personnel can actually come in and play on those computers, have a test environment set up with the CAD or the RMS system or the field reporting system, where officers and records folks and dispatchers, et cetera, can come in and write up, for example, dummy reports or dummy calls for service, and sort of walk them through. And it's not scripted, right? They're walking themselves through the process. They're clicking the buttons. They're seeing what this does. They're seeing what that does. And there'll be vendor reps on site to help answer any questions. But those computer labs are really, really beneficial. And so lastly, this phase ultimately leads to contract negotiations. The implementation phase, simply put, is when the installation process begins. But even before the physical installation of the system occurs, we have to develop yet another project plan. Right, you need a plan for the installation of the system itself, and so we need to map out a timeline. We need to test. At some point, test the system once it's installed. We have to look at what interfaces occur, or need to occur, or need to be built. What interfaces have to be built, and are they functioning correctly? We have to test all that stuff before we go live. At some point. We got to provide training in the new system, and that training has to be scheduled as close as possible to the go live date, so users don't forget how to use the system. And then lastly is the closeout phase. Okay, think of this like a punch list, right? It's making sure that the system works as it should be. The system is doing what it is supposed to do. You also make sure that the vendor has done what it is contractually obligated to do, that the vendor has done what it was supposed to do per the contract. And then ultimately, we archive all the project documents for future reference and retention purposes. Remember that anything that's created throughout a project like this is mostly going to be public records. And you will be required to maintain those documents and all those records, all those communications as per a retention schedule. So let's get into today's approaches to RFPs. Okay, these are going to be some quick But overarching, very important concepts to remember as you go ahead and draft an RFP. You want to remember that the vendors they really must be given the opportunity to describe how their solution will meet your needs. And historically, what we've done is we've sort of log jammed them into the corner and said, this is what we want the system to do. This is exactly how this system should operate. But we didn't build the system. The vendors built the system. Okay, the vendors created that system according to their desires and market analysis and like any other business, they offer a service or a product, and in an open and free market, people have the right to choose their system or to go to another system, another competitor, say. So when we sort of force feed the very specific keystrokes, if you will, of these systems, okay, it limits possibilities. We want to look at the approach to an RFP from the opposite perspective. We want it to look like a problem solving opportunity. We wanted to describe to the vendors, here's our situation, here's our problem, here's some of our needs. Now we need you to tell us, how does your system resolve this? Okay, you're not buying a commodity. So the RFP should reflect this invitation. That's what the RFP is. It's an invitation to creative solutions to your needs and problems. And so it really shouldn't dictate how each and every button works in the system. And that's kind of the approach that we've taken. Okay, so right off the bat, you want to think about limiting, if at all, even putting in there, but at least limiting those specifications. And consider a new approach, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. Consider a new approach to gaining insight, a better way to gaining insight into the potential system that you're going to be living with for the next 10 years. So this is a partnership. Okay. You're getting ready to, for lack of a better term, get in bed with a company for a decade or so. And that's typically a common life cycle of a system is 10 years, although even that metric is changing with cloud technologies over the last few years and whatnot, and different licensing structures. But historically, a 10-year shelf life for a system is 10 years. But that's changing. Okay. But allow for flexibility. Remember, it is a partnership that you're about to um, embark on. So let's look at approaches to an RFP. Okay. From traditional approaches to radically different, much more aggressive, more modern, bolder, modern approaches. Historically, what you see there on the in the first box, what we have done is a copy and paste approach. If you were to, and by the way, you can get online and Google uh, uh, police CAD, RMS, RFPs. There's all kinds of there's you could find dozens and dozens of RFPs on the internet from previous projects. It's public record once a project is done, and so you'll see, and you may have experience in this, that traditionally will have a sort of a 4-element RFP. The document has a core RFP document. It sort of gives an overview of the project and a high-level description of what's needed. And then there'll be these attachments or these appendices, and the two key appendices or attachments are these spreadsheets. Think of the Region project up in Portland, right? They had a 4,700 line spreadsheet spelling out all of the functional specifications that they required in the system and the technical specifications in the system. And then you'll have the terms and conditions of the project. Now, some agencies include those as off-the-shelf, either city or county terms and conditions that they use for any project. Some other jurisdictions ask the vendors to provide the terms and conditions. Either way, it's an item of negotiation, which has to be talked about during the contract negotiation phase. And so, a quick question for the group: You should see a question pop up on your screen there. What systems are you seeking to replace or purchase? As we talk about these RFPs, so you think about what is it you're looking to replace. You have CAD, RMS, both CAD and RMS, body-worn camera systems, a jail management system is JMS, an intelligence-related system, or case management system, or other. Okay, interesting. Looks like you all picked just about everything except JMS, but literally every option was checked off with the group except for JMS. Interesting. Most of you are picking a CAD and RMS system. Curiously, follow-up question to that. And by the way, your answers are not going to display to the general group, so anonymity is provided. I'm not going to broadcast the results to everybody. What is the current vendor for the system you're seeking to replace, and why is it being replaced? Is it software dissatisfaction? Is it product end of life? Is it a cost issue? Is it a compliance issue? Think about the reasons, and you'll see why at the end. I'm telling you that because it's something that we can help you with. So, software dissatisfaction appears to be a big issue. End of life is another common answer here. It looks like someone says here you're piggybacking off another jurisdiction, so we're looking to maybe go solo. Interesting. That's a really interesting comment. So she says we piggyback off of a bigger city, and we're looking to maybe fly solo. We're seeing more and more and more of that. Look at the Region Project, right up in Washington, and it was a system hosted by the Portland, Oregon Police Department. Just absolutely fell apart, and those 43 agencies are now all looking to go with a different system, and many of them with their own systems. And those sort of regional projects are extremely complex and difficult to manage, and so we are seeing more and more agencies do that, to go, looking to fly solo. Another dissatisfaction with the project, or I'm sorry, product, company not meeting deadlines that were promised. We're seeing a lot of that too, especially with the larger mergers that have happened recently, with the large conglomerates that have occurred with the buyouts and acquisitions and whatnot. That have happened in the last year. It's been a very active market in that regard. Another one says our vendor stopped development on our product. We are forced to look for something new. Project being replaced. All of the above. Okay, I feel for you, whoever wrote that. Too many bugs in the system. System's very old, so we get a lot of good input here. Okay, interesting. And a lot of you named your vendors too. So we've the reason I'm again, I'm not going to spill the beans or broadcast any private information or information that you want to keep personal, but the vendor names that you all have mentioned in here are companies that we have all worked with in our projects as a contractor, as a consultant, and we have a lot of experience with every company you all have mentioned in there. And we can tell you, I'll tell you more about this at the end of the presentation, but we have the ability, because of that deep industry experience, to tell you in the future which companies might fit the bill and which would be ones to steer clear of, because we do stay on top of all of that market intel and get all the feedback from our clients. And being in business for 12 years, we have about 2,000 people that attend our training programs every year. And plus, we do another half a dozen to a dozen consulting contracts every year. So we work in about 30 different states as a neutral provider of these services. And we hear the word on the street. We hear the intel. We hear the very direct feedback from you guys, just like you're writing there in your comments. And we see the patterns. Not only do we see the systems themselves, but we see the comments and the feedbacks. We see the patterns. We see the quote unquote the word on the street, and it's consistent. Those companies that people aren't happy with, those names pop up time and time and time again. Another quick question for you: do you or any of your staff have experience in managing this kind of project and writing an RFP? Now, I would imagine most of you are attending this presentation because the answer would be I would think no, not really. Just again, a good reason why you're probably here, and that's reflecting in the answer. So 73% of you chose not really. So understandable, right? That's why you're on the in the training today. So this traditional, back to the presentation, you can close out that box. Just hit the X on that pop up, and it'll bring you back to the presentation. So traditionally, we have this approach, right? The old tried and true, although not good, RFP process. Big long list of specifications, a core RFP document, terms and conditions. A little bit more modern of approach. Quite a step ahead of how we have done it in the past is to write a core RFP document, an overview of the project, descriptors of, general textual descriptors of what you're looking to do, what systems are being replaced, what is some of the general functionality and features that you're looking to get. But the key differentiator with this approach is that second bullet point there where it says probative questions for vendors. And what that is drafting a list of questions. Okay. Generally, when we've done it in the past, it's about 50 questions, and they're open-ended, text-based questions. They're open-ended questions for the vendors to answer. And what that does is it allows the vendor to describe in their own words how their solution is going to solve your issues, how their system is going to meet your needs. Now, this is only successful if the questions you ask correctly represent what your needs are. Okay. And the reason this is such a better approach is I want you to think about these open-ended questions versus the functional specifications list or the technical specs list. Okay. The first approach there on the left, where you have a long list of specifications, leaves vendors with a binary choice. Okay. Or at least usually what those specification sheets, and we've done them. Okay. We built many of those. When we come in as a contractor, when we get hired to write an RFP, we have to follow the procurement rules. We will try and encourage if we see a better way, if we see a better process, if we see a better way to procurement and RFPs than what is being currently done at that jurisdiction, we will push for that and we'll make the recommendations. But at the end of the day, we have to follow what the client wants us to do. We will give them our recommendations. But look, if they want us to do the traditional approach, we will do it. And so we've done many of those long-winded sheets. But what they say in there is sort of a binary choice. And the vendor has to say, yes, our system can do this, or no, we don't do this. Now, some of the better sheets will say, we'll give 3 or 4 options. Yes, we can do this. No, we can't do this. Or we can partially do this. But still yet, compare that to the vendor being able to write several paragraphs that describe the most key, most critically important elements of your project. Okay. I want to know from the vendors, tell me how your system does NIBRs. How does your system do case management? Right? Describe to me in your own words. Don't tell me that yes, our system does NIBRs. Right? Checkbox on the spreadsheet. System must be compliant with NIBRs. Check. That's great, but how does it do it? Our officers, like one of the bigger systems out there today, which we would not recommend, requires officers to enter a count. Some of you, I know I see some familiar names. You've been to my other seminars. You've heard me talk about that one system where officers, when writing the report, have to enter a count number. How many offenses occurred? Is it how many victims are there? One victim, two victims? The officer shouldn't have to put that information in there. The software should know that. So tell me, vendor community, how does your system do this? Don't just check the box. And the third option is perhaps the most different than what we have done in the past. And it is a for lack of a better description, I'm going to call it a one pager. It's a problem statement. Now, I have never personally seen a city. Now, it may, granted, right? It may have happened. I don't, we don't see every project that's out there, every single one. But we have read in our research, okay, in our extensive research on procurement practices and reading all these books and guides and looking online, there's this approach called a problem statement. And in a problem statement approach, you are writing one page, 2 page, 3 page document that describes here's what we are facing, here's what we need, here's my problem. My system is coming to end of life. My system doesn't work. My system isn't doing the things I need to do, but you need to describe that, right? What is it that it's not doing that you do need it to do? Where is it failing? Is it failing in accuracy? Is it failing in timeliness? Is it failing in compliance with public records retention? Is it in scheduling or retention and dispositioning? Is it failing with NIBRS compliance? Is it failing because of bugs in the system? Is it failing because it has outdated software behind it? Software coding that's decades old. Describe to the community what the problem is, and then we make the vendor community tell us in their own words their solution. Now, some of you may be thinking there's no way we could do that, right? That doesn't tell me enough information. Well, we would combine the problem statement with the other elements of that one phase that I talked about a few minutes ago, right? So we would do a problem statement, we would do a system demo, we would have a hands-on lab, right? You might have a Q&A session with vendors. You'd have some dialogue with the vendors. So those 3 or 4 elements taken together with the problem statement will in fact provide you a very nice picture of what you're looking to get. But that hands-on, that lab, that sort of computer lab is central to this problem statement approach. Okay. Just sort of step back and think about the difference between a binary choice, checking off a box, yes, we can do this, no, we can't, versus a nice full description of what the system can do. Okay, tell me what you can do. Show me screenshots. Remember, because the RFP process is only one part of the greater effort. It's only one piece of the puzzle. It's only one of the elements of the 5 phases of the project. It's what initiates the process. And if you don't like the responses to an RFP, we cancel it and we go out for bid again. And we have seen where that has happened time and time again because, well, it could be a number of reasons. The agency isn't satisfied with the company's bidding. The companies outprice themselves, perhaps. That's another area where it could be for a myriad of reasons. But imagine having to go back out to bid using that traditional approach versus a problem statement approach. It's a much easier process. Okay. The problem statement approach is bold. It's a new dynamic. It's a much more modern, new way of procurement, and one that I would recommend. The challenge is, and I get it, I'm tracking with you because I know what some of you are thinking. Your procurement office or procurement rules would, that's just not the way we do it. We have to follow the traditional approach. And I get it. I feel your pain, but at the same time, don't presuppose that change isn't possible. That's what the project team exists for. Okay, we get the project team in place and work towards changing the process if necessary. Just briefly showing you since most of you have not been through a project like this, 72% of you said you really don't have experience in these kinds of projects. This is just to give you a very rough sort of timeline. What, how long does a project take? What's a typical timeline? And key is typical. And these time frames, please understand, can vary or can be different significantly based on the size of your agency, based on the size of the project itself. Are you replacing one system, two systems, three systems? Is it CAD? Is it RMS? Is it both? Is it a shared system? What resources do you have? Again, how big are you? Very small? Are you really big? What does your county or city procurement process look like? And then all of it ultimately is tied to the responsiveness of the vendors. Okay, so these are very rough timelines, but project planning is typically 1 to 2 months. Okay, that is assuming that the pre-planning has occurred, you've been green lighted, you have your funding that's already been tentatively approved. Then the project essentially kicks off, and we start doing the project planning. Then we move to needs assessment for a very small agency, very small project, maybe 3 months. Okay, for a medium size agency, more like 10 months, and even then and beyond for larger projects, for larger agencies, 10, 15 months. Procurement could be what, 8 to 16 months, roughly speaking, again, depending on the size of everything. Implementation, small system, big agency, small agency, etc., could be 6 months, could be up to 14 months. Okay, if you're really large, could be upwards of 2 years to get it implemented. Okay, it's possible. The closeout is typically very quick. Testing the system, accepting the system, 1 to 2 months. So let's talk about what your options are as it relates to an RFP and how we might be able to help you. Um, I told you in the beginning of the presentation, we have developed or we strategized on ways to help agencies in these unprecedented times, budget cuts. Uh, it's the perfect storm has occurred. Civil unrest, all of this stuff is really unprecedented. It's incredible what you guys are having to face, and my heart goes out to you who are having to deal with these issues day in and day out at work. It's our responsibility as a servant of you and the law enforcement community to come up with options, right? And so we sat down as a team. We said, look, what could we do? Because we think, quite frankly, that the days of high priced, high dollar, big consulting contracts are over for the most part. You can, and we've done those kinds of contracts. We've done the big six-figure contracts, multi-year contracts for larger size agencies that need either the expertise or they need the big guns, meaning additional hands, right? The hired guns to come in and help with the project. We've done those. But looking forward, looking down the path down the road, 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, we're all going to be impacted by this. And so we're trying to get ahead of the curve and thinking, what can we do to help you? And what can we do as a business to continue to survive, quite frankly, if things really get bad. And so it's a win-win. We believe it's a win for you all with these challenges. It's a win for companies who come up with new and effective strategies to deal with budget cuts to their business revenue streams. So we sat down and said, look, we can come up with some creative options, and we've written dozens and dozens of RFPs. It's what we do as a company. It's a big part of what we do in addition to our training services. So here are some package options, each of which can be customized and structured to fit your needs. But a basic package looks like us providing you an RFP. Now, everything we provide to you is customizable. They are pre-populated with content that for the most part, will be applicable to you in your project. It comes from years and years of experience, specific to, by the way, CAD and RMS projects. They can be tweaked for other types of systems, but the core documents are geared towards and focused on CAD and RMS projects. Okay, so let me get that out of the way. It doesn't include fire CAD and fire department field reporting systems and other agencies. This is for law enforcement information management systems. And a basic package provides you the core RFP document, We also train you in the procurement process and building the RFP, and we provide you a vendor evaluation scoring sheet. A next option is to provide you sort of the full kit and caboodle, where we would provide you all the pre-formatted and pre-populated documents, their forms, their editable forms. Again, understand, while they are pre-written, they are designed for you to fill in the blanks and to customize for your specific agency policies, protocols, needs, procedures, etc. So you're being given pre-formatted content, but just like I've told you in this presentation, you don't want to ever copy, cut, and paste from another project. So what we're providing to you is what we think is the best of the best from our previous work, and we provide you very clear instructions. Look, we need you to understand that this should be customized to your project. You may not need this, but you may need this. You may not need that, but you should add this. That kind of thing. And so we give you everything from PowerPoint presentations for your project team, a project charter document, a communications plan, a work plan, a risk matrix plan, the different assignment forms and project update forms. And we do have system specification sheets for CAD and RMS. We've got those big long spreadsheets with all the different standard functionality. Okay, so those sheets, those specifications, if that's something you want, are available as part of this package. But again, as you've heard me say, that's not necessarily the approach that we would recommend. But they are available, and they include all of the industry standard tech and functional and technical specifications that a basic system should have. And when I say basic, I mean a CAD or RMS system that has field reporting capabilities, that has incident reporting, case management, crime analysis, and the, excuse me, and the like. And then option 3 is ads. These are all, one option 2 includes option 1, option 3 includes option 2. Option 3 is a really neat thing in that we give you access to our web-based project management system. And you don't purchase anything, you don't have to download anything. This is what we use when we do project management work. When we get hired to do this kind of work, we use a very nice web-based project management system that allows you to manage and track everything and anything about the project in real time. So as opposed to one person having access to that information on that project or the status of that project at any moment, it is the entire team can go to this site. It's like a website, but built for project management. You can go online, the chief can go log in and say, he can immediately see, okay, where are we on this task? Who's assigned to this task? Who's responsible for completing this tasks? I want to see the current RFP as it is. It's in there. It's live. Part of the system includes document management and collaboration. So you would be working on the RFP itself within this project management system, and you can have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people working on it at the same time and see the changes as they are occurring. So it allows you to assign tasks, to receive email notifications of updates and reminders of what's going on, and it's a centralized place for you to manage anything and everything related to that project, soup to nuts. Okay, so those are your 3 options. The third being it adds that project management system capability. So we think with this option, these options that we have created, you get some really significant benefits. Okay, some very nice results. And as I alluded to a minute ago, I really do think the days of high-cost, big-name consulting services are, for the most part, mostly over. These long-term impacts will be ongoing, we think, and granted, some complex projects at agencies that do have surviving resources, they may still require those high-touch services, but nonetheless, we want to lead the way to providing a better and much more cost-effective solution. So in our experience, a bulk of the time in a project like this is spent specifically writing the RFP, writing the specs. If you're going to go that route, just writing the specifications, writing the document, getting it approved for all the different people it has to get approved by. And so with a pre-written package of information, we're pretty confident in saying that we could reduce project time by upwards of 67%. Uh, the other thing that comes with our options is that we provide insight into the vendor community. We don't we serve law enforcement. Okay, and we can provide you insight into the vendors, as I said earlier, that fit the bill, and we can tell you about those that you should steer clear of. And we'll give you plenty of references too. We can, if you need to verify what we're telling you, we'll give you give you plenty of agencies to call and confirm if you're so inclined. But there are certainly names that we hear over and over and over again, and that we see with our own eyes. All right, can you hear me now, folks? We power just completely shut down in our building. Okay, my apologies. Power just shut down and kicked in with the generator. We have a construction project going on. Actually, it's a police department. They're building a brand new police department right next to our office building, and anticipated potential power outages. So, apologize. Control costs and runaway overtime, certainly with an approach like this, and understand that projects typically, generally, medium-sized to larger-sized projects are typically anywhere from 2 to 3 years overall, and that gets expensive. The cost of a consulting firm for that amount of time, depending on the scope of work and what's involved, can range anywhere from, on average, about 100,000 to 350,000 for an average project. Again, totally depending on the scope of work and what's involved in the project. And so, with these options, you will also get a defensible procurement process. We've been through it many times, and providing you with information that's been proven, and tools that have been proven time and time again. We have never had a project be contested, a procurement process be contested with anything that we've worked on. So the price for this stuff, is a mere fraction of what you would be paying for those services. So I'm going to switch screens. Don't worry, I'm still here. I'm just going to pull up very quickly. I see we're like coming up on the hour, so I'm going to do this quickly. I got a little bit long-winded, but I do want to pull up just a quick sampling of these things. Well, took long enough, but it finally came up. So, in the interest of time, I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of a sample RFP. I apologize, we're already a couple minutes over. But this is a version of what you would get. It's a Word document. It's completely editable. We've color coded the document so that anytime you see red text, it's something that needs, without any doubt, something that needs to be um, customized for your agency and for your project. Now, any of the document, any of it is editable, obviously, but we've highlighted in red the things that you have to pay really close attention to. And we would walk you through this, right? Even option one of our package includes us kind of walking you through the process and give you the training that you need. So we're not just going to hand you this and say, here you go, here's what you need, thank you, and leave you hanging. We're actually going to train you in the process and walk you through these documents. Okay, so you include things like a project overview, statement of work. What are the minimum bidder qualifications that you need? What is the general descriptors of the desired system functionality? What systems are you looking for? You need case management, crime analysis, protection orders. That's all stuff that you have to identify and define as part of your project. Providing them the vendors workload measures is really important. This helps with their pricing. They need to know things like how many users you have, what current system do you use now, system or systems plural, how many reports, what volume of data is going to be involved. Obviously, you want to bring your old data into the new system, or at least make that old data available to the new system via some kind of data lake or what have you. But they need to know either way, what are we stepping into? What's the volume of the data that's going to be involved in this project in terms of incidents, arrests, supplements, FI cards, citations, crash reports, how many vehicle records, people records, property records, etc. And you want to define to them, what does your current technology environment look like? What do you use for GIS? Tell me about the state's criminal history systems, the state level systems and driver's license systems and criminal history systems. Is there a state collision reporting and traffic citation system? What do you use for NIBRS reporting? Who do you report to at the state, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? What's the breakdown of the agency look like? How many people do you have? What's the rank structure? What's the team going to be comprised of? What's it look like? Who are we going to be working along? Where your office is located? Do you need to have access to CAD and RMS at different districts, different offices around your jurisdiction, or is it just one station? Obviously, so that's a great example, folks, of what I talk about, the big picture. Okay. You get so mired down in the details, you forget to tell the vendors, hey, we have 6 districts and 6 offices, and they all need access, and each of those needs 10 licenses or that kind of thing. So got to step back. And this, what you're looking at here is that big picture stuff, right? This is really, as basic as it is, this tends to be the basic, but yet ever so important big picture items that the vendors need to know about. What does your GIS information look like? How is your city or county geographically structured when it comes to CAD and RMS? What layers do you need in the mapping? Beats and zones and districts. How do you dispatch? Right? What are your key systems? What does the network look like? On and on and on. So this is that core RFP document that I talked about. This is kind of the problem statement document. I like to call it a one-pager, but the reality is you're never going to have a one-page purchasing document. But it describes the general needs. Company information form. This is a great way to collect information about the companies that you may be doing business with. What's their history look like? Have they ever been sued? And recognize, by the way, just because a company has been sued doesn't mean that they were wrong. Okay, it's good to know about previous claims and suits, and that is an indicator to you that you might need to dig a little bit, but it should not be a disqualifying factor in and of itself. It's just helping you to do your due diligence. Okay, so here's a question. For example, describe any legal, legal action taken against your company, et cetera, et cetera. And then we would put a note. We recommend putting a note in there. Please, an asterisk. Please note this is not a disqualifying question, if that's okay with your procurement folks. But that's best practice. Subcontractor information. And here's sort of those general open-ended questions. Okay, this is just a sampling. But when I talked about those, say, 50 questions or so that you want to have the vendors answer, briefly describe the following. What is your project plan? Do you follow standard project management institute methodologies? Who are the people and the roles and their education and certifications and their employment history that are going to be involved in the project? You see, you're not going to get that out of a big long spreadsheet. Okay. Briefly describe how you will deliver the implementation of the software, including methodologies for installation, testing, data conversion, interfacing. Tell me how you're going to do that. I want you to describe to me how your approach is at, and is it going to meet our needs? Okay. Describe your training. Describe if your system's report writing feature is included in the core RMS application, or if it's a separate application altogether, and whether users write reports within RMS or within a separate system altogether. I have actually seen, it's not happened on one of our projects, but I have actually seen where police departments have selected the system and didn't realize that the records management system and the field reporting system were entirely different applications altogether. Okay, and they didn't realize what they were getting until it came time to contract negotiations, and you're way down the road at that point. So, and I'm not saying either one is right or wrong. I'm just saying it was a surprise, and you don't want to be surprised with that because it has real impacts and ramifications on how you approach the project thereafter. System scalability, on-prem versus cloud. What operating systems is your system compatible with? Tell me about your user interface. Is it Windows based? Okay. Is it point and click, drag and drop? Tell us. Show us screenshots. Okay. So the questions go on and on and on. And this is designed to to encourage the vendors to describe their solutions to your problems. Okay. Now, with the package, again, this is the core document. There are a number of other items we don't have. In the interest of time, I think it's more important for me to stick to the timeline than it is to take up too much of your time and lose you. So I will tell you this. If you are interested and you would like to see some of the other things, right, there's all kinds of other stuff. And this was slated to be a 1-hour presentation for you. So there's the forms and there's the project management system, which I can give you a live demo of. We can screen share and you can see how the project management system works and the other forms. So what I will do, hang on one second, let me switch screens. Let's see here. Is wrap up with the final presentation slide, and then you can, and then we'll be in touch if that's the way to go. So you have a couple of ways to get these package options that I've been telling you about. And can you guys hear me okay? I see somebody says there's no sound. Could anybody let me know? Is my audio coming through okay? Can you hear me? Test, test. Okay, thank you. These packages, they start, again, pricing is all contingent upon what package you want, and is it for CAD system only? Is it for RMS? Is it for both? So pricing is really dependent upon what you need it for, one system or two systems. It depends on the package number that you want to pick. And thus, what's included, as I showed you earlier, each comes with their own thing, and you're looking at a starting price point on the low end of about $2,500 up to about $10,000 for option 3. Again, all of it being customizable, but that's kind of a general price range that you're looking at for those different options. Bear in mind, though, we will accommodate and customize those price points and options, package options, to your needs. Now, there's another way to get those things for nearly free. And so we're testing this as an introductory offer. These RFP packages are new for us, and part of this new thing is to do this introductory offer, and we are going to give you options 1 and 2 at no additional cost at all if you attend this course that we're doing in February of next year. And so it's a 2-day procurement and project management course, February 24th and 25th next year at Roseland Shingle Creek Hotel in Orlando, which, by the way, is beautiful. Very nice hotel. We did another event there last year. And you can see the day 1 and day 2 schedules. You will be taken into a deeper dive on what we've talked about today. We'll teach you project planning. We'll teach you project management. We'll teach you how to do the needs assessment, how to map out and build workflows on day 1. And then on day 2, we will be giving you the RFP and all those documents that we just talked about. We will look over other RFPs from the past and take away some key lessons from those. And then we'll spend some hours going over the vendor landscape, and that's where I and my staff will tell you about the good and the bad and the ugly with the systems that are out there. And that's, to me, I think that carries its weight in gold, is getting insight on something that could save you a lot of money and a lot of headaches down the road. And again, we're not here to bash anybody. We're not here we don't represent any of these vendors. We are giving you, we all come from law enforcement, by the way. I was a former police lieutenant myself here in Coral Gables and did 20 years on the job, and all of our staff comes from some kind of law enforcement background. So the course flyer, additional details about this event, is in your handout in the handout button there in the webinar. If you click on that handout button, you can download the course flyer for that event and see some details. You can go on our training page at our website and also see the details there. Register online. The course is $995, $995, which is a steal considering that you're getting everything that I just talked about, including that RFP package. So that's it for the slides. I have one final question to pop up on the screen for you. I think, let's see the poll question. Yep. So this is what I was alluding to a second ago. If you want additional information, if you want to see the rest of the package, you want to see the project management system, you want additional details, just indicate yes or no. And if you put yes, we'll follow up with you and give you a deeper dive and show you some of the other documents and answer any questions and give you a free consultation. With that, any questions from the group, go ahead and enter them. Also, once you're done with that polling question, you can enter your Q&As into the chat box. I'll be happy to answer any questions related to this presentation. This record, by the way, this session, if you did not see my comments from earlier, this session is recorded. So I can send you a link to, thank you, Lynn, I appreciate it. I can send you a link to view this presentation online. It is being recorded and we'll make that available to all of you. Excuse me. You're welcome. Thank you. So don't forget your handouts. There's all kinds of stuff. I really do think is valuable information in the handouts. Go ahead and download those. If you click on the handout button, you'll see an icon to the left of that pop up, the little download button. Just click on that. You can download. I think the first two items are links. Link to our website and link to a NIBRS report writing manual that we also have available. But thereafter are your project guides, your toolkits, articles, case studies, and so on and so forth. So lots of good information in there for you. Thank you. Appreciate it, Marcia. All right, guys, if you want to cut loose, I'm really apologize for going a little bit long, but hopefully it was worth it. Once you're done downloading everything, you can click the exit button at the bottom, and I think there's a survey question that comes. It's one question. One question pops up, says, "Did you enjoy it?" or something like that. So you can let us know your feedback on the course. And we're here for you. Contact us anytime via our website. I appreciate your all's attending today. Wish you the best. Stay safe. Keep your heads up. Stay strong in these crazy times. And thank you so much for attending and hope to hear from you soon. Take care, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.